Thank you for tuning in to another episode of the Girl Dad Show. Today I have my good friend David with me today on the show. He is one of the founders of Comerit and, among other things, a prolific AI enthusiast and technologist, and so becoming quickly a good friend. So, welcome to the show, David.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for inviting me on. This will be fun.
Yeah, I'm excited to talk to you. I feel like we've been talking intermittently for the last year now, getting
Yeah,
to know each
I
other.
think that's the case actually. I mean, it's really fun to actually have conversations and build relationships with people who have done amazing things, and you definitely are one of those individuals.
Yeah, and I'm glad that no matter what, we've been able to kind of navigate work and friendship and build it all together. It's been really enjoyable getting to know you, but I'm excited to interview you because I don't know if we've ever actually talked about parenting itself. We've always talked about business and being an entrepreneur and work and technology, but I don't know if we've actually had this full-on conversation. So I'm super excited.
No, yeah, I think all of our conversations about optimizing business or potentially planning something, yeah, but
Yeah,
parenting is a real thing,
that's right.
and
Let's
yeah, go for it.
Let's jump into it. Why don't you start
Okay.
by telling the listeners what you do for a living? I kind of gave a little brief overview, but I would love to have them understand what you built at Comerit and what you're working on.
Sure, I'm not quite a serial entrepreneur, although I like to dabble in lots of different things.
Mhm.
But for the past 25 years, I've really primarily spent my time focusing on enterprise-wide solutions. The majority of the organizations that I've worked with happen to have SAP as their major transaction system. But over time, in the 25 years, what I did is try to stay ahead of technology a bit and keep adapting not only our internal processes, but our people. So it was always my job to stay ahead of the technology that might be or could be implemented in large enterprises, and then make sure I had the proper skill sets and software engineers and project management to actually deal with these changes. And then it was a great thing because I actually spent a lot of time in multiple industries. So I got to learn a lot about aerospace and defense, about manufacturing, pharmaceutical, oil and gas. Really, really fun time. And in fact, it really feels like that amount of time has flown by. The last
Hmm.
15 years, as you mentioned, I've been with Comerit, which now, as these enterprise systems have really become mature, the focus has really been on managing massive data volume growth. And I think what we'll see today is data volume will continue to grow. And
That's
so
right.
that's what I'm handling now and really helping people prepare their data for to be able to implement things like predictive analytics or artificial intelligence, those type of things, generative AI, hot
Yeah, it's a
topic.
very exciting time technologically. I mean, it's at the cusp of a new dawn, right? And
For sure.
it's so fun because I think being similar age, we've gotten to experience two of these, which is really incredible for us to be able to experience these kind of cataclysmic changes and shifts, in
Yep,
technology. So, um,
definitely. It's
yeah,
like
very
like a
cool.
new dot com thing again, right?
That's
So
what I mean. Yeah, I
yeah.
feel like it's like just as big, if not bigger than Web 2.0 and .com boom. So it's kind
Certainly
of exciting.
faster. I felt like I had time to breathe back in the day when I was in the dot com, which is actually the time period when I was raising my children, was mostly through that dot com era. So,
Yeah. Yeah,
so
super fun. Talk to me about that. So when did you have kids? And you said you had it during the .com era. Um, were you starting your business as you were having kids, or did you start your business after having kids?
so like I said, I'm not quite a serial entrepreneur, but I've always maintained multiple companies at the same time, which was both a challenge, but a blessing for sure. And
Hmm.
my kids are now, I'm actually, believe it or not, I'm actually a grandfather. My daughter's 24,
Wait, I didn't know
and
that.
yeah,
That's
and we have
amazing.
a 2-year-old granddaughter who's absolutely brilliant, very, very smart.
It's amazing.
I kind of got started in Silicon Valley era of dot com in probably 94
Hmm.
ish, maybe
Hmm.
even before that, if I
Hmm.
take a step back, but I didn't have kids at that time. I really started in this whole big enterprise solution right as my kids were born. So I had two, and they were really close together, 1 and 2 year old.
Hmm.
It was very interesting. And we early on, my wife and I made this decision that, okay, no matter what happens, you're going to stay home with the kids
Hmm.
because that's the only way we're going to make this work. So at that point, young, I actually ended up moving from Silicon Valley, commuting. I moved all the way out into the San Joaquin Valley.
Hmm.
It turns out it was a decent move because my wife was able to stay home with the kids. I think that was probably even the harder thing to do, is give up her own career to raise two kids. But they turned out to be phenomenal kids, and yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah, that's awesome. And so, what other companies did you have? Just out of curiosity, and what did you dabble in?
So it's funny because I deal with artificial intelligence now, providing solutions and that, and
Hmm.
really prepping people's data for that. I, we were trying to use artificial intelligence pretty far back. One of my first companies I created was Apex Nutrition. It was so I took Apex Nutrition, who's my friend founded that organization,
Hmm.
but I built my own little model that I could run and operate. And it was really an incredible time where I could leverage software in helping people get in shape.
Hmm.
But really what I was doing is getting them in shape, using analytics to do that, but also using analytics to help me sell supplements. So that was one of my
Nice.
first companies, but I was running that during I was running that, and I was also running a kids transportation company simultaneously. And then I was also doing some not really life coaching, but motivational type coaching for others. So I started that, and then throughout that, one of my clients actually came to me. Well, a couple things happened first. 24-hour fitness liked the idea so much that they ended up buying it. I ended up becoming a director there for a short period of time. I actually worked for a company, 24-hour fitness, and then I got recruited in to go into .com. And someone
Nice.
just said, "Hey, if you could do that, you could definitely do this." And I'm like, "What's this?" And she took me out to her car, and I was like, "Okay, well, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to do it because you have a nicer car than I do." So
That's a good barometer for success, right? What kind of
at
car do you
least
drive
that's what
in?
I thought. I found out later that the really really wealthy guys were driving F-150s,
Oh my gosh,
Fords.
that's another
So
level of wealth. Yeah, absolutely.
yeah,
So you were actually a health guy. So it sounds like
yes,
you were more into like health supplements
exactly. Yeah.
and more of a health nut than and then you pivoted into technology almost by chance, it sounds like.
That's exactly what happened. I mean, I actually went to UC Davis, graduated from UC Davis. I was a pre-med student, got my
Oh
degree
yeah.
in exercise physiology. I wanted to do sports medicine for professional teams, stuff like that.
Yeah.
And I still do a lot of research and studies within that field. Well,
Yeah.
now I can just leverage all the technology to really investigate what we're doing in terms of regenerative health. That's
Yeah.
a big thing for me right now as a hobby.
Hmm.
So, but yeah, yeah, I started over there, and then what I found interesting, was the human body mimics many of the operating systems that are required to run these big enterprises. So that was the correlation. It was easy for me to make the jump. I could understand what they were talking about in terms of different systems and networks optimization. It made a lot of sense. In fact, it made so much sense to me. I don't know. I could tell the story briefly, but
Yeah.
the reason I got into the business itself is someone overheard me talking about these enterprise systems, but I was really only just explaining it as I understood it. She thought I was like explaining it as an expert, and I wasn't. I was just making like the analogies, and she looked at that and said, "Wow, you know SAP?" And I didn't understand quite what she was asking,
Yeah.
but I answered like, "Oh yeah," and I started to tell her. And she goes, "Would you come and run our SAP company?" And I was like, "Well, what's that pay?" And then the rest is history. I couldn't believe I was raising two small kids, and I needed to make more money, and I I was honestly quite shocked when she said what she said, and then the rest is history. I never
Oh my
left.
gosh, that's an amazing story. I love
So
that. I love that. And then that's a really great story. And I have a bunch of questions for her, but I do want to know what the child transporting business was. What was that? I don't even know what that is. Is that
So
you talking about like
so
a school bus system?
basically, when .com started, people, a lot of parents, especially living in the Silicon Valley, most parents had two working parents. They
Hmm.
Everyone went to work.
Yeah.
But the other thing that was obvious is that the parents in the Silicon Valley were very, very, they pride themselves on excellence. And so education, sports, music, that was a big thing. So if you were a parent in Silicon Valley, you spent a lot of your time shuffling your kids around to those things. After school study, piano lessons, and
Right.
sports.
Right.
Well, there were no services to get your kid back and forth, and everybody worked in San Jose. Their families
Yeah.
and their kids lived in Fremont. So where I'm
Yeah.
like, that sounds like a service that's required. It turns out that the logistics behind that are far more difficult. And like, these are people's kids, and hey, you were late 2 minutes. I know there's
Yeah.
traffic, and so it just became very difficult. But that's what we did. We transported. It was all word of mouth business, and we literally could almost pick up from one location. It was the drop off that was interesting. Everyone's kid were at different parks and school systems, so that's what it
Yeah.
was all about. It almost worked.
Yeah. Well, it's kind of interesting because it's like almost ahead of its time because I don't know if you really watched the new release for Uber Kids. So there's like
No.
a whole kid drop off thing for Uber now.
Oh
It's like
man.
vetted drivers, safety measures, all sorts of things, and then like it's the Uber logistics system, but for literally exactly that. It's like
Wow.
David, you're just 15 years ahead of your time. That's what it's
Yeah,
all
I
about.
think
Yes. Yeah.
unfortunately it may be the case with a lot of things. I'm too soon on things, or I can't get the things completely vetted out. There's this work-life balance. Like
Yeah.
I think that was one of the challenges, is really doing balancing what I wanted to do as an entrepreneur, and then
Yeah.
raising a family, and also taking care of my own health, because I came from the health and fitness industry.
Right. Right, right, right. So then I guess the question goes back to the kid versus the entrepreneur thing. It sounds like you actually had kids and then you kind of got thrust into entrepreneurship just from like the opportunity of making more money.
So it was really a couple of things. I think I realized that the only way I was going to be able to guarantee that I could spend time with the kids
Yeah.
was to work for myself. And I knew there was inherent risk to do that, because maybe I wouldn't get paid sometimes. And that actually happens. It happened multiple times. And I had to, sort through that. And those were some of the most difficult things, is like, t- not telling them, but telling them we're not going to Disneyland or something like that. And fortunately it wasn't that many times, but you do, you know, uh, it's one of the drivers that caused me to go out and work for myself, as opposed to going to work at, I sometimes I think, man, should I have taken that job with SAP or IBM or Deloitte? There were many opportunities,
Yeah.
but I fortunately was able to observe some of those people's lives, and some of them have done very well.
Yeah.
But there seemed to have been a tremendous sacrifice. So my friends that did that, I really look up to them to be able to balance their life, but the commitment that they had to their organizations was incredible. One of the advantages of being on your own is the flexibility to be a
Right.
dad. You know, and
Right.
and my wife, I used to come home, I remember, but our kids were so close in age.
Yeah.
I'd pull up and she'd have both of them in her hands, and they're both crying, and I know she's like, "It's your turn." Like
Ah,
I could see it on her face, like, "Oh, this is it." I
yeah.
it's what I got to do. But yeah, it was. I feel very, very fortunate to have experienced that.
In hindsight, where do you sit now? Now looking back at it, are you glad that you were an entrepreneur, or do you um wish you just stayed on the career of like taking an SAP job and growing with the company?
No, I'm still pretty happy with my decision, mostly because it allowed me to maintain a lot of creativity where in some of the corporate environments that I did work in, as I did actually for time period work for some other organizations over that time period, it just when being an entrepreneur, when you're creative and you can't just like put a stop on that. Yeah, let me get back to that. I needed that flexibility to try and fail if
Mhm.
I had to, you
Yeah.
know, or I didn't need it. It's something I wanted to do. It's
Yeah.
what kept me going is having that the freedom to be creative. And
Yeah.
in my corporate jobs, like you were they gave you tasks and then you just followed those regimentally. There wasn't as much room to be flexible and creative. Although
Yeah.
I still was able to do that. That was fun.
Yeah.
I bucked the system a little bit.
Yeah. I can't imagine a world where you don't buck the system no matter what you're in. So,
Yeah, a little
um,
bit.
what do your kids think about what you do for a living?
So for the longest time, my kids thought I played video games for a living.
Really? What do you
Well,
mean?
because I was always in front of a computer, so they didn't know
Oh,
what
got
I
it.
was doing, but they're
Yeah.
like, Dad's always home and
Yeah.
he's always in front of a computer.
Yeah.
So as
Yeah.
they got older, that's really what they thought. They're like, Mom, they'd say, Hey, well, we want to go somewhere. And my wife would say, Well, Dad's working. And they're like, Well, he's just playing video games. And they're old enough to understand. It's like, he seems like he's plays. Yeah. So, I
Oh,
think it's really that's an interesting question because I think probably only till this year. My son's 25 now, I think, if I get this right, or maybe let me just calculate. My son's 26. My daughter's 25.
yeah.
I don't believe it. I believe that only until this year did he realize what I was really doing. And
Hmm.
he's asking more. It took him time to go out there in the world,
Totally.
do things. And then he
Totally.
came back and realized, gosh, my dad runs his own company for a living. That's really weird,
Yeah.
so he's now asking questions. He's very bright. Actually, I may have him start to do some sales here because he's very interested. He's very good
I like
at
that.
selling. So
I like that. That's great. So I might have him come work at the family business a little bit and teach him some entrepreneurship.
absolutely, at least, he definitely has that gene in him
Yeah.
where, in many ways, he's much better than I am. He's much
Yeah.
more disciplined. And
Good.
so I think if I can give him my strengths,
Yeah.
I think he'll do very well.
That's fantastic. Yeah. It's really funny that you say that because I was talking to somebody the other week about just fatherhood and kind of like being a dad and really like having a huge amount of frustration and disconnect with my father through my teens. And then as I entered the workforce, having, a lot of like empathy and understanding, you
That's
know?
my son,
And then,
100%.
yeah, and then
He
now that
had no understanding as a teen.
yeah, and then now that I have kids, it's beyond empathy. It's like love. I like love and
Wow.
respect my father
Yeah.
so much, because
Maybe
like
that's where he's entering. That stage where he's entering.
yeah.
I kind of get that sense,
Yeah. Yeah, that's good, man.
but
That's really interesting to hear that, especially because he's in the workforce and he's asking you these questions and now possibly getting involved. Is his aspirations to eventually be an entrepreneur, or does he want to like just do this and figure out what he
I
wants to
think
do, or
I think he will naturally follow in that in that pattern
yeah.
because he's a natural leader. He's very creative. Um, he it's wild. The older he gets, the more like me he is
Mm,
with his own strengths,
that's awesome.
so but you could see the tendencies that he has that are definitely probably influenced from me, but or maybe just purely genetic. So I think I'd like him to continue to develop his leadership skills, his management skills, and sales skills before he does. Um,
Just out of curiosity, why those three things? Given the fact that you're, a enterprise technology implementations company, why not technology? Why not AI? Why not engineering? Why those skills?
you know, I think I'm just looking at his overall set of skills.
Yeah.
Where I think he would be a great engineer.
Yeah.
I just think he gravitates more towards where I see his strength. He's really good at understanding people,
Mm,
but he's also even better at optimizing the weaknesses and strengths of people. Like it's naturally, like for example, it's really weird when this happens. He'll overhear me working, and when I'm done, he'll say, "Hey," if he's visiting, he's "Hey, Dad, can I talk to you for a minute?" And I'm like,
mm,
"Sure." And he'll say, I noticed that this is what you were doing in this conversation. Um, I don't know if you would take this recommendation." But then he recommend, "Here's what I observed."
damn.
So what I noticed is that his interests are in really in the improvement of people by coaching. So I guess he's more of a coach than he is an engineer. And sometimes, like for example, like Tiger Woods,
Hmm.
right? Tiger Woods has a coach. That coach may not be as technical or as a from an engineering perspective as good as Tiger Woods, but he's brilliant at an observation um, of a professional
Yeah.
where he can make those minute adjustments, and that's why. And honestly, I'd love for him to be like an electrician, something that you can use your hands
Oh my
on, or
gosh.
you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
But I think he just naturally gravitates to this observation
Yeah.
of people.
Yeah.
So
Awesome. I love that. I love that you know your son so well. And I think that that's a really good answer to the question I had about why those skills. And I just thought it was more like around you thinking that that was going to be the skills that were more valuable in the future based on technology's advancement. But it sounds like you're just actually saying, I know my son, and these are the things that he's good at and he's passionate about, and I leverage that, right? So that's a really
yeah,
different answer.
because
It's good.
if I could guide him the other way, I could tell him like what I think will be more valuable is people with plumbing skills and
That's
and,
exactly right. I just had
and
this
electrical
conversation last
skills.
night. I literally
Yeah,
said, like, it's so funny how the world has changed so much because right now, I mean, even 15 years ago, it was like learn how to be an engineer or a data scientist, right? Those are like the two things that made so much money. And then now, obviously, engineers still make a lot of money, but I could see in the next 5 years that like going completely down very, very quickly. It's going to be a race to the bottom as AI gets smarter and smarter. And what's going to go up is all the things that AI can't touch for the next 20 years, which is like toilets and like electrical panels
exactly.
and things that still need the same old infrastructure, just not advancing fast enough, and they're
Exactly.
breaking.
I really, if I could coax him into doing it,
Yeah.
I would do that. I think he
Yeah.
just sees himself more as leading people. And I'm
Yeah.
trying to convince him that, look, you can be an electrician and lead people, but
Totally.
that's,
Totally.
but
It's
yeah,
actually really interesting, yeah, because when I think about what I want for my kids are a lot younger, right? They're 5 and 7. But I don't care about college anymore unless they want to be like something specialized, like a doctor or something, like why go? Just go learn hard skills and do what makes you happy and makes you money. Because, like the reality is after being an entrepreneur now, I just feel like being more balanced is more valuable than being successful, in a lot of ways. And so it's kind of an
right.
interesting time for me. I've been thinking a lot about this stuff.
Well, and it's really interesting to hear that perspective from you because, you were able to do the entrepreneurial march. And, I consider myself a baby entrepreneur. I'm still trying to
Yeah.
get there. But the recognition of, hey, maybe that whole path that I, I grew up with that path, right? No one had to tell me to go fill out
Yeah.
my applications for college and stuff. That was ingrained. It's like my parents didn't even tell me that, but everyone around me, it was just common. Like if you were in sports or you were in any of the advanced placement classes, like the mindset was get good grades, get into a good college, go to
Really?
college, get into a big corporation and work your way up the food chain. That's kind of what my path was. But I once I was doing that, I realized actually I just want to be an entrepreneur.
Mm,
So I went that path,
yeah.
and I probably should have stayed in it a lot longer, but I just early on, I think probably it was a combination of watching my own parents, my dad, be an entrepreneur himself. Um, this is really wild. You know, I mean, my father originally had a typewriter business where he fixed typewriters.
Cool.
So I lived through the time when typewriters were replaced by Apple computers.
Yeah.
So I watched him actually go from an entrepreneur, and then towards the end of his career, he ended up working for United as an employee, United Airlines as employee. As typewriters were replaced by computers, he just, he realized, hey, I can. It's interesting how the cycle of financials or economics work, right? So he
Yeah.
started off as an entrepreneur, but then uh, he ended up working for United Airlines.
Yeah.
So,
Well, it's
but
also interesting how, I mean, in that, even that little mini chasm, or sphere, that's innovation disrupting his
it did.
business and
I watched
industry,
it
right?
happen live. Yeah,
What
it was.
lessons can you pull from that, from your for your business? What are some of the things
Oh
that you took from
man.
that?
Well, that's interesting. So it happened quite fast, actually. I remember he worked for an organization first. He was their lead typewriter mechanic. And while he was doing that, um, he was bringing home, they would allow him to take different pieces home of the Apple computer. So I can't remember how old I was, but I was really young. I built my own Apple IIe. He was bringing home
Wow.
the pieces. Um,
Wait, so these guys knew that that technology was coming then,
yes,
and they were embracing it and trying to get their people knowledgeable about
yes.
it. So
That's why he was.
why weren't they able to adapt into the new system? I don't get
So
it.
I think that's probably what I think. I you know I, well, I can only say this now looking back. My dad probably should have just transformed and started working on computers. He, in his mind though, so he for quite some years after he maintained in the typewriter business because he thought no one will be around to fix typewriters. Which actually is fairly logical. It's like if everybody's working on computers, he would gain all the business.
Yeah,
Um, what
yeah,
happened though, the reality was everyone just dumped their typewriters
right.
and they said computers uh, are the logical next step. And
Right.
overnight, there was no more business. I remember like he was still working on these typewriters, very intricate, delicate pieces of equipment. Not delicate, actually, they were quite sturdy, but there were many, many pieces.
The
And I
complex,
remember
yeah.
him working on the very last one, and him telling me what this is going to be the last one, and then he's going to do something else. I didn't know what he was going to do at the time, but it was almost as if a light switch came on and or turned off, and then business was over. And everyone I knew, nobody talked about typewriters.
Yeah,
We only were discussing out the next version of our modems.
yeah. It's
So
crazy.
what I learned is that you know I think um, at least back then that you did have time. You could make an adjustment.
Yeah,
You know what I feel like though today is that things are changing faster than during .com,
yeah.
and I I don't know if there's how I'm already watching consultants getting concerned like will I am I going to be replaced? I literally had this conversation with some of the developers. Will I be replaced? Now that's actually something I believe is that there will be a transition maybe over the next 10 or 20 years, but for at least the next 10 years, in my opinion, these developers, the good ones will have the opportunity to become what I say code auditors. I don't think you'll see a lot of people working um, heavily writing millions of lines of codes. But I think there'll be a value in saying, hey, can you read this over? Make sure that the AI didn't build a back door.
Yeah, didn't hallucinate, right? And
Didn't
like have a very,
hallucinate.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's the same thing happening right now in finance too. I mean, like a lot of these AI tools are ripping through bookkeeping on the accounting side, and then on the
Mhm.
financial modeling side, they're ripping beautiful models, right? Projections and pro formas. It's fantastic technology, and it kind of makes me look at my job and go, oh man, if you know, as a fractional COO or a fractional CFO, I'm like, this is definitely going to change the way I do work, but even as of right now, like people still they're like, "Look, can you just double check it?" They're gonna still
Right.
ask me to double check it because like
100%.
no one trusts it, you know, and we're not really sure how accurate it is. And so for a certain amount of like I don't know, years, I feel like there's a certain level of safety for those of us that actually know what we're doing. You know, for those that are just learning it, I'm sure it's a little bit different because if you're just coming into it, this technology is going to be better than you. Like, you know, it's going to have 20 years of experience. For those that already have those hard skills, I think it's going to allow for them to be auditors of the tool and help it train to be smarter and more accurate.
Let me ask you this. Did you see that recent interview with Elon Musk, where he said that basically only 1% of intelligence will actually be human? All the rest of the intelligence within the next, I don't know how many years he gave it, will all be artificial.
Whoa,
99%.
I
That
didn't
was just
see that.
recent. I saw this post.
How many years? Did he say decade or years?
I'd have to pull it up. I'd be totally guessing. I don't want to guess, but
Yeah, that's
that
wild.
interview I think released yesterday, and it's interesting that he said that because then the follow-up question is, so what are we gonna do as
Yeah.
humans?
Yeah, we're gonna be plumbers and electricians. What do you mean?
I know.
Tup, tup,
We
tup,
live in
tup, tup.
really interesting times, and I think I'm glad that you brought me on this. This is a dad podcast, right? And
Yeah,
the reason why, to me, I wanted to do it because I think, uh, one, it leaves something behind for my kids and their kids to look at and go, oh,
yeah,
look at this is grandpa. He did this one back when there was real, uh, back when we were actually living in the real world, not in a simulation.
yeah.
I'm just kidding. I mean, who knows? Maybe we are living
Oh
in a
yeah, yeah,
simulation. But the thing is I think about what is the world going to be like for my grandchildren.
yeah.
You know,
Seriously.
truly, especially when the comments like that come out. Hey, he expects only 1% of our intelligence to be managed and commanded from human intelligence,
Hmm.
right? 99% will be absolute artificial. That is an incredible statement.
Yeah.
I have to dig in more. I only saw the small. Hopefully, that's not completely taken out of context. But you know, this this talk, this podcast about being a parent. I wanted that chance to talk to you about what your thoughts were in terms of what kind of world do you think your kids are younger, and so they are going to live in this um, artificial, maybe simulated environment.
Yeah.
Do you think that so should that dictate what you and I do as entrepreneurs and as people that know very successful individuals that know the technology that know like between you and I we probably know everyone that could solve most of the problems in the
Yeah.
world, right?
Yep.
So knowing that, what do we focus on so that our kids have a world? I actually, to be honest with you, I really enjoy the 1980s.
Yeah.
It was a great
Yeah.
time.
Exactly.
We
Yeah. I agree with you, and I agree with that sentiment. I mean, for me, when I think about my kids and what success looks like for me as a dad and also them as a kid, is that, you know, it's so hard to predict what I think is going to happen because things are moving so quickly. And unlike you, I don't even understand the technology. It's like so beyond me. Like I still don't really even understand what AI is or even how it works. I get it's like a stacking of data sets and machine learning, and then it's like workflow. And I get that kind of like general directional understanding of it, but I don't comprehend how it can scale so fast. 'Cause everyone says, oh, it'll compound on itself and the generator will start to like make it smarter. But I don't really understand it. But I'm assuming it's like when people say, you know, a million seconds is like 11 days, but a billion seconds is 30 years. You know, I'm assuming it's one of those situations where like the scale is so big when you actually put it into like motion that like it's one of those situations where have you ever heard of that? Like where it's
Yeah,
like yeah,
100%.
like
And
where
it's
like the
actually
scale is
quite
like
accurate.
infinitely bigger. Yeah, you're like, whoa, it's 30 years. What the heck? So that jump from million to billion is really vague. But I'm assuming it's something like that. But for me, I just like don't understand it. All I know is that it's headed into this thing that's going faster and faster and higher velocity. And I just think back to like what is true and core, right? And so
Mhm.
I'm hyper focused on just like things that I think will be important to people. Because I hope that in the future, if things start to get more automated and things are more managed, they'll be more utilitarian and they'll be more logical, right? And so the hope is that then it'll just be really around who can navigate people best and who has the best soft skills and those core skills. And so for me, it's less about like specialty because
Mhm.
now it's almost like even like I mean, gosh, I don't want to say this because I feel like it's important to go to school and learn things, but that's why I have a less priority or college now. I don't care at all if my kids go to college at all because I have a feeling that, even in the next 5 years before they even get into middle school, almost everything's going to be Googleable, like or AIable, or like, hey, just
100%.
like ChatGPT how to do a biopsy, and then you program it into a robot and the robot does it, right? Like there's all this stuff that's going to be like all technologically advanced and predictable and manufacturable through systems and technology. But what is not going to be able to change is the use of soft skills and people skills and leadership skills. That's why I was really double clicking on why you wanted your son to learn management because I thought you were on the same thesis that I was on. Because my thesis is I don't know where the technology is going to go. My kids will probably be way smarter about it than I am by the time they're ready to go into the workforce, and they'll be able to teach me what the best thing is for them, for making money. But I do think that no matter what, they'll have an advantage over everybody else because I'm going to focus on social skills. I'm going to focus on confidence skills. I'm going to focus on negotiation skills and things that like I believe are very attractive to other people. Not
Mhm.
robots, not technical skills, not hard skills, but where people naturally gravitate towards. People like to follow. They like to follow confident people. They like to follow people that care, that have high empathy, high communication skills, high negotiation skills, high delegation skills.
Mhm.
These skills that are very attractive to people, I think, are going to be the ones that are going to thrive, be able to leverage and make money off of. And so that's my thesis. I don't know.
Well, if I can add something to this perspective.
Please,
So
please.
you know that I spend a tremendous amount of time looking at and evaluating how AI might enhance or optimize any kind of business process
Mm.
or not even just business, music. So my last podcast, I think we almost hit 3 million in impressions. Impressions don't mean that much, but yeah, it's
Wow,
probably at about
still really good.
3 million. But the the thing was is I that podcast was largely on how SAP would impact the or how SAP and AI would impact the music industry.
Wow.
So, but we're always testing AI in how it can handle different things. And one of
Right.
the things that's really popular right now is AI
I
and
love
audio.
seeing it. It's so funny. It is the
It's
most hilarious
interesting,
app. I
right?
mean, yeah, it's
It's
super
fun.
interesting.
But I'll
Yeah.
tell you from my perspective. So the other thing about my background, you play guitar too, right?
Yeah, I play a lot of
And we
music.
went.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'll tell you. So I love those applications, and I I mess around, and I always go to my kids. Hey, what do you think about this song that I just created? Right? And now I didn't just create. I thought of an idea and had it create. I'll be honest. And I believe it will get better. AI will get better. But I believe what it's doing is creating more of a focus and an attention on how humans create music and paintings. Honestly, I believe that paintings done by a human will become more valuable the better AI gets. Because
Mhm.
I think as humans, that's what makes us uniquely human. I would much prefer to buy something that you painted, like, hey, hey, I know Young painted this thing.
Yeah.
I'd pay for that.
Yeah.
Then hey, Dave created this song in Suno. Because this is where I think we're uniquely different. And I think AI will continue to try to get to this place. Everyone talks about artificial super intelligence, ASI or AGI, artificial general, this thing like AI is eventually going to have this conscious mind. But I believe that there's something that we as humans actually have within us that will never be replicatable through machines.
Mm.
It just we will create because being human, you have to be human to know what a human desires in terms of creativity
And
and
yeah,
you
and
know.
there's also the flaws, right? The reality is, I mean, you can program in flaws and nuance like that, but the at the end of the day, there are going to be things that we mess up on in our paint stroke, or there's going to be things that we mess up in our
Oh
guitar
man.
strumming, and those little things are going to add to the flavor of the music that, you can try to program, but the reality is it'll be too intentional, it'll never be accidental.
Yeah, how could you? Yeah, so that's I had this as part of the podcast or my recent podcast. You'll like this one. I did a just this week. You'll see a podcast that I'll release. It was with someone who's a music producer,
Yeah.
been part of Earth, Wind, and Fire, been part of Snoop
Wow.
Dogg, and we kind of talked about this. The change from analog to digital. And we talked a little bit about AI, but we didn't get, I want to do another podcast that kind of explores very much what you're talking about. These little human inflection,
Yeah.
either intentional shifts or accidental human shifts that make things very human and real, you
Absolutely.
know. And
Absolutely.
I think regardless of where we get from an AI perspective, we will, in fact, it will increase the desire for human things. I think literally AI is probably one of the best things that will happen
To the
for us
arts.
to appreciate each other. That's just my positive outlook and spin on where I think things are going with AI. With AI, like this conversation, I enjoy it. We're doing it on Zoom, but if we were sitting down in Hawaii on the beach talking about this, and I mean, could you
Yeah.
imagine how much even more this would be? I think
Enjoyable.
it'll increase the natural tendencies to want to do these things as humans together, to test and monitor reality.
Hmm.
Being together, having dinner, which we need to do sometime. you know,
No, totally. Yeah. We still haven't met in person yet. Yeah, we absolutely will. David, this is awesome, man. And it's really helpful to have this conversation with you, but about especially as it relates to me thinking about my kids and the future of technology here. And it sounds like you put some thought into this as well. But I do want to be conscious of your time, and I do want to ask my rapid fire question. So if you don't mind me switching gears a little bit and
Yeah, let
firing
me
off some
give me
answers.
1 second. Okay,
Yeah.
I just want to make sure. It looked like I lost a piece of my keyboard, and I see it now. So go for it. We can rapid fire. Yeah.
All right. If you could give yourself, if you can give advice to all the soon-to-be parents and parents out there, what advice would you give?
I definitely what we give to our kids in terms of attention is I would tell people to focus, put the phone away. Like this sounds super cliche. Take everybody's phone, get rid of them. Do that human interaction. One of the things I noticed with like even my granddaughter and other people's grandkids is that they're really good on the phone at 1 years old.
Oh my
You
gosh,
hand them a
yeah.
phone and they can tap buttons and stuff like that. Get
Yeah.
rid of that stuff. Go play in the park. Pick pieces of grass. Sing
Yeah.
songs. Go do that
Yeah.
stuff. If I could get anyone to reverse their actions, or to focus on actions, do things that are just between you and your children.
Oh, that's actually really powerful. Especially for me because I got disconnected from my phone for the first time the other like literally 6 days ago, and I it's really sad because I could not remember the last time I didn't have my phone. Like it's probably been over a decade. Like I literally cannot even remember the last time I was disconnected fully. But my friend Jordan from Flipboard Films was like, "We're going on a hike and we're not bringing that." And I'm like, "What do you mean?" She's like, "Just don't bring it. It's not allowed." I'm like, "Okay." And I was like, "Let's go for it." And I literally like, but and I kept like tapping my pocket because it felt like I
Because
was
that's
missing
where
a
it's going,
limb.
right? You can feel it vibrate, right?
Yeah, and I felt like I was missing a limb. That's how weirded me out. And I
Man,
sat there going like, when was the last time I was disconnected like this? And I genuinely can't even remember. It's been that long. Like I genuinely can't remember when this was the last time I was that disconnected. It's
man.
wild, yeah. So it's really helpful for me to hear. If you can go back and tell yourself one thing before having kids, is there anything else? Is there anything you can tell yourself?
Have Have more kids.
Have more kids. Oh my
Yeah.
God, man, we're like best friends. That's literally what I would say to myself too.
Yeah.
I love
Yeah.
it.
That's what
Yeah, you
I
got
would say.
more. They're great,
Yeah.
aren't they?
Well, I mean, now I have my granddaughter, but yeah, I wish I had as many as I could.
Yeah, they're so freaking amazing. But that's awesome. Okay, so do you have a favorite book that you like to reference?
Yeah, I do. And I've read lots of different books even recently and stuff, but my favorite book still to this day is
Mm,
What to Say When You Talk to Yourself. Have you heard of that book?
no, that's cool.
So, yeah, I recommend that to anyone. And the reason why is I don't think people realize how much when we're taking a shower, driving a car, listening to the radio, or even sometimes at the movies, how often um, what what you're doing is talking to yourself.
Mhm.
And to me, like this is one of the most important things I ever learned was if you don't control what you say to yourself,
Yeah,
then how what are your thoughts being developed by?
right.
Because I don't think people realize how much they talk to themselves. And often, unfortunately, the things that we say to ourselves are not entirely positive.
Yeah, they're never, yeah.
And
Yeah, I mean, that's when you let the self-doubt creep in and stuff, you know?
yeah, so that's the book. I mean, there's so many great things out right now. Um, so many great books that I've
Yeah,
seen written, but that's my favorite for people. Uh, it's one of the things I think is most important to understand in life.
super helpful. So, David, when you're not thinking about building your business and being an awesome dad and grandpa, what does David do for fun? What's your downtime activities?
And uh well, so if I'm not with the family, honestly, I I wish there are a lot of things. I'll tell you there are a couple of things I love to do. I'll tell you one of the things I love to do. I love um wake surfing and
Oh,
because
nice.
yeah, so
Cool.
it's safe, it's peaceful. I love surfing, but the not having the conditioning and the paddle power that I used to, it's just much easier to start on a wave that's already like created for you. And then you
Yeah.
then your friends can sit there and enjoy you doing your
Yeah,
tricks. They're in the boat with the music.
that's
I don't
right.
know.
That's
That's what
right.
I like to do.
Yeah, and you can also control the weight and starts to stops.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you do this when you're tired. You're like, okay, that means shut the engine. I'm done.
That's funny. I
So
love it. David, thank you so much for taking the time to be on the show, man. I really appreciate the conversation. It was really, really enlightening for me.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, thank you for inviting me.
Yeah, excited to share this with the world. We'll talk soon, okay?
Okay.